Alonzo Harris hit the ground so hard his vision went dark at the edges, but he kept crawling, pushing dirt and gravel under his palms as he tried to put distance between himself and the men who had dragged him out of a car minutes earlier. His wrists were numb from being tied. His cheek was split from the last blow. He could still taste the tape they had ripped off his face when they decided they didn't need him alive anymore. Behind him, footsteps moved in the dirt, steady and unhurried, the sound of men who believed he wasn't getting far. He forced himself upright, took one stumbling step, and then another. The field around him was silent except for his breathing, and he knew he had maybe seconds before they came after him again. Hours earlier, Alonzo had been driving through Los Angeles after finishing a late shift, worn out, but on a familiar route home. He didn't see the car following him at first. It was only when the headlights pulled close and stayed there that he grew uneasy. Before he could turn off, the vehicle sped around, cutting him off so sharply he had to slam his brakes. Two men jumped out, one yelling for him to get out of the car. He barely had time to speak before the first punch landed, fast and hard. He was dragged through his own door, thrown to the pavement, and hit again until his ears rang. When they taped his wrists and shoved him into the back seat of their car, he knew this wasn't a robbery. They didn't ask for his wallet. They didn't search the car. They only drove, fast, without talking. The ride became a blur of turns, sudden stops, and the sound of one man's breathing as he watched Alonzo in the rearview mirror. Whenever Alonzo tried to ask what they wanted, the man in the front seat turned and told him to shut up. His wrists burned from the tape and his head throbbed from each hit, but he stayed alert, trying to memorize anything he could. Streetlights, a gas station, the sound of a train somewhere in the distance. He didn't know if any of it would help. He only knew that if he stopped paying attention, he'd lose the one thing he still had, the chance to fight when the moment came. They finally pulled off the road near an isolated patch of land outside the city. The car door opened and hands grabbed him by the shoulders, dragging him across dry ground. He could smell dust and something chemical on the clothes of the man walking behind him. One of them said they were almost done. The other laughed. They forced him to his knees and pressed something cold against the back of his head. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He waited for the air to change, for anything that signaled what would happen next. And then, for reasons they didn't explain, they pulled the gun away. The blows began again. Punches, kicks, the edge of something metal hitting his ribs, and each one landed with the intention to break him enough that he couldn't run. The men argued about where to leave him. Their voices rose and fell, shifting between impatience and anger. He heard one say they didn't need him alive. The other said to hurry before someone drove by. When they stepped a few feet away to talk, Alonzo realized this was it. They weren't checking on him. They weren't guarding him. They were deciding how to kill him. He rolled to his side, pushed himself up with his bound wrists, and ran. The first shots missed him. He didn't hear the next ones, only felt the vibration in the air behind him. He sprinted across the open field, stumbling over ruts and rocks, digging his heels into any patch of ground that felt stable. The men yelled, but they stayed near the car. They hadn't expected him to run. That single moment of surprise was the only reason he was still breathing. When he crossed into a cluster of trees, he dropped behind a trunk and listened. He heard one man curse, then a door slammed. The car engine roared to life, and the headlights swept across the field, searching. Alonzo stayed low. His wrists burned from the tape. His chest ached every time he inhaled. But he didn't move until the engine faded. When he finally crawled out, he realized he had no idea where he was. There were no houses nearby, no lights, just a long stretch of dark land and the distant hum of traffic. He walked in the direction of the noise, half delirious, shivering from pain and adrenaline. His legs buckled twice, but he forced himself back up. He told himself he would not die in a field. Not after everything. He reached a road after what felt like hours, but was closer to 40 minutes. A passing driver slowed when he saw Alonzo waving with his bound hands held out in front of him. The man stopped, got out, and froze at the sight of Alonzo's injuries. Alonzo kept his voice steady as he explained he'd been kidnapped, beaten, and left for dead. The driver helped him into the truck and called police. Alonzo's breaths came out shallow and fast, but he stayed awake until the sirens arrived. Detectives pieced together the route based on what Alonzo remembered and found tire tracks near the field. The investigation pulled in leads from the neighborhoods he had driven through earlier that night. Within days, 2 suspects were identified, men linked to prior assaults who had targeted victims the same way, using intimidation and force to control them. Alonzo was the first who escaped. His survival depended on pain tolerance, timing, and a refusal to accept what the men thought would happen. When investigators photographed his injuries in the hospital, bruises, cuts, and the marks from the tape that had torn at his skin, they told him that most victims in cases like his never make it out. Alonzo didn't respond at first. He was still replaying the moment he ducked into the tree line, the shouts behind him, and the realization that staying still for even 1 second would have meant the end. Months later, when the case moved toward trial, prosecutors told him that his escape had stopped the suspects from abducting others. Alonzo didn't ask for praise. He didn't want to relive the details any more than he had to. What he wanted was something simpler, the knowledge that what he endured would be the reason no one else faced those same men in the dark. He rebuilt his life quietly. The scars stayed, but so did the memory of the night he outran men who thought they owned his fate. Every detail he gave investigators helped secure convictions. Every breath he fought for in that field carried forward into someone else's safety. And every step he took away from the headlights that night became a reminder that survival doesn't always come from strength. Sometimes it comes from the single moment you decide you are not dying here. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.